This is Dianne Andrews in Black and White. The issues you don't want to talk about. The arts and entertainment you need to know. And now here's your host, Dianne Andrews.
Welcome to Dianne Andrews in Black and White. Thanks for being in the audience. Thanks for watching us on YouTube. Please start subscribing to us on YouTube, Dianne Andrews in Black and White. And please, we thank you on TV. Continue to watch us because now we're all over the state of Louisiana. You've heard me say for months, which I've been doing this about 10 months, and we've been filming about 8 of those 10 months. And I said, we want New Orleans, we want New Orleans, we want New Orleans. God answers prayers because Pelican Broadcasting Network has us in New Orleans and a bigger presence in Lafayette and also a bigger presence in Baton Rouge. Just check Dianne Andrews Talk Show. That'll take, if you Google that, check that, that'll take you to my website, and my website has all the channels and the times and the listing that we're on TV. I have wanted to do this show for 9 out of the 10 months that I've been on television because I believe that our veterans are the main thing that keep us safe. If we didn't have our branches of government, ISIS would have been here a long time ago. And as I said back in August, I think one of my second shows was on ISIS. And I said that they're not a JV team, not at all. And I think they've proven it as they continue. In fact, I'm doing another show on ISIS later. But today we're going to talk about veterans. And the people I have behind me that I'll introduce you to represent every branch of the military, except we didn't get an Air Force guy in here. But one of my shows a little while ago on homelessness showed an Air Force guy who is now homeless and who had PTSD. So I've had several veterans on, but this is a show specifically for veterans and whistleblowers. And in saying that, I have Shay Wilkes with me from Shreveport, Louisiana, who was in USA Today last week, and I think this week, right? You've been in there twice in USA, so he's a regular star here. He worked at the VA hospital in Shreveport, Louisiana. We'll tell you about that story. Then I have David Lacerte with me, who is our Secretary of Veterans Affairs. He is an attorney, but don't hold that against him. He is an ex-Marine who was in Afghanistan and Pakistan. Thank you. I have Sean Cronin with me, and Sean represents 3 branches. He was in the Army, the Navy, and the National Guard. Yes, ma'am. And they had to kick you out for medical reasons, right?
That's right.
That is amazing to me. I've never met anyone who's in 3 branches of the military before. That is quite a tribute to you.
Thank you.
And my very special guest, Megan Saunders, who lost her husband from suicide. She is a widow of a veteran who committed suicide. And we're going to tell you that story. You've been hearing all over the press, all over the country, about veterans not getting the adequate help they need, about these wait lists that have been hidden, about people dying based on these wait lists. And I think in Shreveport, we talked about 38 deaths that were attributed to some of the problems in Shreveport. Is that what I read in USA Today?
There was a tab on the list that I obtained that had veterans that 38 were deceased. It was one of the tabs. It was an Excel sheet. Yes, that's correct.
So tell me the whistleblowing you did. Tell me exactly what and why.
You know, there's only 2 things I've ever wanted to do in my life. Mm-hmm. One is to be a soldier, mm-hmm. and the other one is to help veterans. Mm-hmm. And God has blessed me with that, and fortunate enough to be able to do that. When I started at the VA...
Of course, you're a licensed clinical social worker.
And I started at the VA, and I started out working in the PTSD clinic. Then I moved to the Vet Center, working with mostly combat veterans with PTSD. And then I moved back to the VA in mental health as the local recovery coordinator. Mm-hmm. The position is basically works with the mental health chief and everything about recovery and working with veterans to get better. And so that was my goal when I went there, and it's something I always wanted to do. Well, as I got there and I started looking into things and started becoming part of that leadership, I started noticing things that just weren't correct. Mm-hmm. One of the things that I noticed... You're a social worker,
you want to help people, period.
One of the things I noticed is I was put over a certain performance measure, and I went to performance measure meetings with the director of the hospital and everything. And I started looking at them, and I was like, man, I've got to get this up to this. You know, how do I do that? And I was actually looking at, you know, trying to do it right, figure out ways, and calling other people. And then I started looking at some of them. We'd go in there the next week, and some of them had jumped up really high, and I was like, hold on a minute here. And you just start thinking about that. And then I had the
Was it
opportunity-
things like you know, with decapitating days in healthcare, a lot of times they don't want you to see many people. They don't want to stay in the hospital long, even if they need it.
Right.
And I know you don't have enough psychiatrists in Shreveport,
Right.
I read, and in the VA period. David, would you address that? Do you think there are enough psychiatrists in the Veterans Administration here in Louisiana? Or?
I don't think there's enough professional people in almost any field, especially specialty care. Things like cardiologists, things like people who specialize in one field over another. A lot of people don't want to work for the VA, because as dysfunctional as it is from the outside looking in for us veterans, how do you think those people feel that work there?
It's even worse, right? Because you're at the grassroots level.
There's no doubt about it.
And you find out early on, you're either on one side or you're on the other side.
Well, psychiatry seems to be, I've had at least 3 or 4 veterans. The homeless guy and my domestic violence guy had PTSD. And all of them who suffered with it said they didn't get the proper care that they needed from the VA. Now, I know you're trying to help with suicide.
Yes, ma'am, that's correct.
Because you have the Military Advocacy Project,
Yes,
which
ma'am.
works with people who are about to or have committed suicide.
Yes, ma'am.
The widows of those, which
That's
is
correct.
Megan, because you introduced me to Megan here
Yes,
to come in.
yes. We created a 501c3. We simply wanted to be another resource available. And what we found as an all-veteran organization is that veterans will open up and speak to one another, and we found that the families will do the same as well. One of the most common things that nobody can properly address is when families start suffering, they go into crisis, they become reclusive. The families, in particular the spouse and the children, quite often think, wow, I'm alone, and they become ashamed of their problems. But what we're doing is we're getting these families out, and we're putting them amongst their peers, and they're beginning to see, you know what, we're not alone. This is something that is happening.
Now, in May, you've got the government, the state of Louisiana, to have an appreciation month for military, correct?
Yes, ma'am, that's correct. Every year across our nation, May is declared Military Appreciation Month. And what I found out was that the state of Louisiana didn't recognize it as such.
Wow.
So I started lobbying some friends at our legislatures, and I said, look, can we start doing something? And I didn't want them to make it a law, because if it became law, it gets forgotten.
Right.
So every year we lobby, and every year the Senate and the House pass a resolution declaring May Military Appreciation Month in Louisiana.
Tell me, how did you meet Megan?
Well, Megan actually reached out to us on our Facebook page, and
Now, your administrative costs are one of the lowest of any program, 501c3, for veterans.
Absolutely.
8% administration, which is something to be said, because most are averaging around 30 to 45% administrative costs. So this group only is 8%. And
That's correct.
I recommend you for that to the audience.
well, thank you very much. Obviously, in the economy today, we have to be very wise with every dollar we spend and invest. And our organization is all volunteer, and our overhead operating costs are minimal. So we're able to give 92 cents of every dollar across the board back to military families.
That's amazing.
Yes, ma'am.
Now, are all the people in government, are all of them who work in VA, the higher-ups, are they all veterans?
No. All the VA, a lot of the VA administrators in the federal VA are not veterans.
That's what I thought I had read. What's your opinion on that? And then I'm going to go to Megan for her story.
In my opinion, the people who care most about veterans and care most about caring for veterans are veterans themselves.
That's right.
That doesn't mean that you have to be a veteran to do your job well or to care about the cause in any way, shape, or form, but it's important that you understand, to take the time to understand what it means to be a veteran, what it
If
means
you
to
heard
serve
that through the
your country.
screen, that's lightning today out here, lightning and storming, okay.
So I think it's not a necessity to be a veteran, but it certainly helps.
And you probably feel better when you know who's working for you, because you all want the IG, the Inspector General of the VA, gone, fired.
Right. We requested wrote a letter to the president requesting that he be removed. One of the things that we've done as whistleblowers is we want world-class care for veterans.
You and I are both going to be in the whistleblower panel seminar that Michelle Reed is sponsoring in Washington, D.C. I'm on the media panel. Which panel are
We have a VA panel. We have a
Okay.
whistleblower
Okay.
panel that we're going to do, and they're whistleblowers from around the country. And we've actually started a group that has gathered whistleblowers, VA whistleblowers, together. We're right at 40 as of today. And we are coming together. We've all had a pretty strong voice individually, but we felt we needed something together. There's power in numbers, and we knew that.
That definitely.
And you know, whistleblowing is tough.
Yes.
I mean, you take a lot.
Were you treated
after
worse
you-
after you first called, what did you call it, the paper there first or television in Shreveport?
The paper, the Shreveport
Yeah.
Times, took the story first, and then I didn't want to do it, but I'd gone through all the internal channels. Wasn't big into that, and I said, you know, I'll talk with you. And then they said, well, you know, once this goes, the TV is going to come after. And I said,
Right.
well, I want to do one. Do you work with a certain station or whatever? And I said, I'll do theirs, and that's it. It wasn't about me. This isn't about me.
Right.
You know, when you're a whistleblower, they'll always come at you and say, hey, this is about him, or they're disgruntled.
But they usually go after you.
Oh,
don't
they
they?
come
Because
after
I
you.
talked to the
Oh,
first
they
whistleblower in
come
the
after you.
military.
Oh, yeah.
He's now almost homeless.
Yeah, it's not easy, and you can't prepare yourself.
Right.
That's one of the reasons we wanted to start VA Truth Tellers and gather VA whistleblowers from around
That's
the
right.
country.
That's the name of your organization.
Right. To help and support each other, and also those on the fence that are thinking about doing it. We wanted to help them because we can prepare them because we know.
Now, we've been hearing about this problem for at least 2 or 3 years. Do you think it's gotten any better?
No.
Anybody think it's gotten better?
No.
Let me, especially because you can tell us firsthand. Your husband committed suicide last year.
Yes, ma'am.
He was mailed his medicine, and he was taking psychotropic drugs for depression, schizophrenia, different mental disabilities, and he just took bottles and turned them up to his mouth and killed
Yes, ma'am.
himself.
He was on about 9 or 10 different antidepressants, sleeping medications, muscle relaxers, and on April 16th, he took all of his medication, massive dosages, and we found him later on that evening.
Yeah, 16 hours, your
Yes.
children were with him.
Yes,
And at the time, 6, 4, 3, and 2,
yes,
a year ago. And your father was the person who found
Yes.
him, I think you told me, Megan.
yes.
Where were you?
I was at work.
Okay. And you were working like 16 hours, or?
I worked, I was a retail store manager, so I worked anywhere from 60 to 70 hours a week.
Yeah.
Um,
So time you walked out of the house, basically,
Right.
he put this down his
Right.
throat. And you told me he had been to the Pineville. I tell you, my father
Right.
passed at the Pineville
Yes,
Hospital.
he received mental health care at the Pineville VA. Yes.
And he also went to Cabrini Green, you told me,
Yes.
in Alexandria. And he had been and to another charity hospital there, to 3 different hospitals?
Yes, it was a series of events that took place. We tried for a while to get him into the Pineville VA for inpatient care. We would call local law enforcement with the Rapides Parish Sheriff's Department
Why the sheriff department? Why?
because we lived outside the city limits.
Oh, okay.
So the Sheriff's Department has jurisdiction. And they would try to get him into the VA in Pineville. The first time that we called, he had a gun to his head. He was trying to commit suicide. I watched my father
Did
wrestle.
he tell you, I'm going to kill
Yes.
myself? I mean, with a gun at the head, I'm sure you said,
Right.
I'm going to kill myself.
My father had to wrestle the gun out of his hand. It was loaded while I was trying to shelter the kids from it. Rapides Parish Sheriff's Department got there. They called the VA. The VA, once again, this is hearsay. I wasn't talking. I was on the phone with them. The sheriff's office was. The VA would not take him. He was
Was
brought
he on
to.
any medication
Yes.
for psychiatric
Yes.
disorders then?
Yes. He went to Huey P. Long in Pineville for what was supposed to be a 24-hour suicide hold. I was called approximately 10 hours after he was admitted. They told me to come pick him up, take him home. That was the end of it. Brought him
Was
home.
he acting much
He was-
better in
he
those
was
10 hours?
Perfectly fine.
He was.
with his
When you
P-
when you picked him up, he was fine.
He was fine. His PTSD rage had went away, and he was fine. He was back to his normal self.
Okay.
We called again. He was having chest pains, and seemed more like a panic attack than anything. So he asked to call the ambulance. So we called 911. A Acadian ambulance responded. They brought him to Cabrini instead of the VA.
But you know, I will, not in defense, but a statement, because I've worked in healthcare. A lot of times with psych disorders, 1 minute you're fine, and an
Right.
hour later you're not fine. So I guess he was fine when you picked him up.
Right.
So they did discharge him, thinking, okay, he's okay now.
Right.
He'll go home and take his meds.
But my concern was, as a veteran and him being treated at Pineville, why go to Huey P. Long to begin with?
Yeah, I don't
Huey
understand
P.
that,
Long
too.
was getting ready to close, and it was an empty
Just like
hospital.
Hurricane Long down here, they all
Right.
closed, yeah, the charities. Why would they send him there?
I can't answer for that. I run the state side of VA as opposed to the federal side, and we're very complimentary in what we do from a healthcare perspective, but we certainly don't have jurisdiction over the federal hospital in Pineville. I do want to say to you, Michelle, I'm sorry that your husband ended his life in the way he did. It's very tragic. Offer my condolences in that, but the federal VA does have a severe problem with the amount of psychotropic and psychotic medications that they prescribe. It's a plague, systematic plague that the VA needs to fix and address. So much so that they deem some VA hospitals as candy land by the U.S. Congress. We need to make sure that we are prescribing the most effective medications and the least harsh medications possible for our young men and women who have fought for us, whether that be from an anxiety disorder, whether that be from depression, whether that be from any sort of mental issue. Now, there's been a push nationally to open the door on a lot of less harsh medications, medical marijuana being one of them. I'm happy that in the state of Louisiana, we recently passed a bill to allow for such medication to be prescribed.
Now, have they found that that helps with PTSD?
In some
Medical
studies,
marijuana?
yes.
Yeah, some
Some
studies.
studies they have determined that. And from my perspective, if we would have had a prescription for medical marijuana for your husband, he would not have overdosed on what he had available to him. And when you're a physician and you have an obligation to care for those patients, that has to be a consideration.
I think it's a merit period. We're
He's exactly
prescribing
right.
too much of those kinds of drugs to
It
people
almost
without, and they need
700
more
times.
counseling.
Yeah, almost 700 times the national average.
Right.
And
And I read that
And Toma.
6,500 to 8,000 veterans commit suicide a year, and 5,500 of them are over 50 because they think they have nothing to live for.
And you asked why do
We're
whistleblowers come forward?
we're gonna take it to break, and then we're going to come right back with this interesting panel. Come on back to Dianne Andrews in Black and White. Thank you.
In 1977, an 8-year-old boy picked up the game of golf from his father. The odds of that same boy then making it to the US and European Pro Golf Tours? 1 in 7 million. The odds of the Big Easy winning the US Open twice? 1 in 1.2 billion. The odds of him having a child diagnosed with autism? 1 in 150. Ernie Els encourages you to learn the signs at autismspeaks.org.
When I give you the signal, you two cut left to the flag. I'm gonna cover you from that tree over there. Remember, don't go for the flag unless you know the coast is clear, okay?
You don't have to be perfect to be a perfect parent, because kids in foster care don't need perfection. They need you.
Order your copies now of Dianne Andrews' latest books, Third Man Out, a suspenseful mystery by Dianne Andrews, and Gumbo for the Heart, 25 stories of faith, hope, and charity, both available now on Amazon.com.
The odds of this daughter of a clergyman spending 11 weeks at #1 on the U.S. singles charts? 1 in 19 million. The odds of going on to win 6 Grammy Awards? 1 in 1.4 million. The odds of having a child diagnosed with autism? 1 in 150. I'm Toni Braxton, and I encourage you to learn the signs of autism at autismspeaks.org.
Mark! Anna! Ooh! Hey! Forgot your lunch. Hey!
You You don't have to be perfect to be a perfect parent. Because kids in foster care don't need perfection. They need you.
Thanks for coming back to Dianne Andrews in Black and White. We're continuing the conversation on whistleblowers and some of the problems in the VA. Now, we're building the largest VA hospital in the country down in New Orleans. Do you think they're addressing, I know you're not with federal, with the hospitals, but I wonder, you talk to people down there, I think you told me. Are they addressing some of the concerns and trying to do more, you think?
Well, I think with the new director, Mr. Rivera, we're very optimistic about our future. But I think there's also a lack of communication because veterans are not being told when this facility is really going to open, what it's going to entail, how many new clinics are they going to have. It's pretty much, hey, stand by, we're building this great state-of-the-art facility, coming to you soon. So I think there's a lot of uncertainty right now.
Megan, if you had to say anything that you think contributed to your husband killing himself, where do you lay responsibility or blame?
Lack of support as a whole. Community doesn't support our veterans as a whole. Government's not supporting our veterans as a whole. And like Sean mentioned, veterans just don't know where to turn anymore. So all of these nonprofits are having to establish themselves to pick up where the government's lacking.
And I think that's going to be the way of the future. I do shows on all kinds of subjects. You know, college education, they're cutting budgets on that. We're cutting budgets on everything, so we as individuals, we've got to get the community, and that's why I wanted to do this show so terribly, to help you all get the word out there to the community. So tell me what, on your military advocacy, how can they help with that project?
Well, what we do is we run a specific peer and family support program. We have mentors.
You're out of Hammond, Louisiana,
yes,
correct?
Yes, ma'am, Hammond, Louisiana. We have many veterans in our organization. Many of them are combat-hardened veterans. And a lot of times you'll find veterans in crisis, and there are numbers for them to call, and a lot of them are a little bit leery. But again, we just want to be a resource. So we have 24-hour-a-day, real-time resources where you can call numbers that we post on our social sites and speak with your battle buddy. Not only that, we don't want to just assist the veteran because Megan is a perfect example. The entire family serves. And often the spouse and the children are kind of left off.
Look at Chris Kyle on American Sniper, the Navy SEAL. His wife.
So,
let me get a little more with her. I'm going to let you leave a number at the end. Megan, tell me how you felt when you got home, because I'm looking at this is all the information, the autopsy, and he had some diagnosis that you didn't even know he had, like black lung and cardiac problems. He had heart problems, and he was taking no medicine for those.
He was taking no medicine.
Pulmonary edema. And
I remember the day I pulled that autopsy report, and I fell to the ground and I cried. His quality of life. You know, you have so many what-if questions that come up. He always complained about chest pains, that he couldn't breathe, that he couldn't run with the kids, he couldn't go on vacation.
Like Eric Garner, right? Let me up, I can't breathe.
You know, and if those issues had been addressed, found, like they should have been, would his quality of life been improved? Would he have ended his life then?
He didn't have any physical handicaps from the service, or did he?
He did. He had some joint problems. He had a broken ankle that didn't heal properly. He did have some physical, but the majority was mental disabilities.
Did you marry him in service or after?
In service.
Okay.
In service.
And so he came back a different person that he went in?
I married him after he had gotten back from his second deployment, so I only knew the post-deployment. Robert, I talked to his family, and they said that the Robert I knew was not the Robert they knew.
Growing up and everything. So he had PTSD even while he was in the service.
Right.
Was he getting treated for that in the service?
Only at the very end. We had spoken, he was supposed to get deployment. We had spoken, and he started getting treatment, and that's when they dropped medical retirement papers and forced him out.
Well, what would you like to tell other people who are experiencing this, other wives, sisters, mothers? What would you like to tell them? What should they do, Megan, so they don't end up like you have with
a voice. Be a voice, be an advocate. Don't be scared to call somebody and say, I need help. Because if you don't, you're going to be sitting here like me saying, what more could I have done? You just got to fight.
I did a show, as you know, I told Megan about it, on suicide with Dr. Frank Campbell, who is one of the 4 suicidologists in the country, in the world, really. And Megan went in and watched it. That would be something good also for people to see. It's on YouTube. All my shows go to youtube.com under Dianne Andrews in black and white. What would you like to, is there anything else that you would like to say, Megan?
To support our veterans more. If you see a veteran, just a simple thank you.
Oh, I do that. Every time I see a veteran, I say thank you, because I appreciate them. I think the way our government treats our veterans is the way it trickles down to us regular people. If they're not being treated right at the top, it's not going to be treated right at the bottom.
Yep.
And that's part of the problem, I think.
Absolutely.
What would you like to say?
I would like to say, as a community or a state, we really have to acknowledge this problem. It is a great problem. We have to accept it. We have to begin to address it. And as you said earlier, it's going to fall upon the community, the veteran community and the civilian community. Reach out. Please don't be afraid. Reach out to someone.
But you know, money is the key. What kind of fundraisers are you doing?
Well, what we do, and again, we're an all-volunteer organization. We go out, and every event we do is self-sustaining. We go out and we start seeking sponsors. We're missing one tiny piece of the puzzle, and that's physical operating space. Once we get that, then look out, we've got the world, because then the grants will flow in, the endowments, the corporate sponsorship.
And nobody in Hammond, Louisiana, who's got empty space out there will help you get space that you contacted.
No, ma'am. We have contacted several people with identified vacant space of at least 8 months.
If there's anybody listening to this and you can help them, please give them space. You can write it off because it's rent you're not getting. I think they can write it off their taxes. Is there anything you would like to leave, David?
Dianne, I think you said a lot of important things today. People like Shay standing up for their country and for their fellow veterans at their own personal peril, because I could tell you the retaliation against our whistleblowers has been unacceptable.
Right.
We need more women like Shay within the system to be able to stand up and have the fortitude to point out what's wrong.
Right.
And then you have your gap-filling provisions provided by your nonprofits, provided by your private sectors. I want to commend Sean and the Military Advocacy Project of Louisiana for doing such a great job of filling in where the government falls short. And it's inevitable that the government will fall short.
Absolutely.
In order to support not just our veterans, but our military spouses and military families. And I want to thank you for bringing all the attention to it, Dianne. Thank you.
And you all, I want to do this again. And, if there's another part of this that needs to be voiced, let me know so we can bring them on. And I want to, at least one good thing I will say, all 4 of your children will be taken care of, right, the rest of their life. They have Social Security, I think you told me?
Yes.
Okay. So that's a good thing. And thank you all for being here. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. You all come back to Dianne Andrews next week. Dianne Andrews in black and white. Or go and watch us on YouTube, the largest talk show in the state now.